welcome. I wanted to come on really quick and tell you this is a special episode. I will be out of town when it needs to be recorded and posted, so I'm bringing back an oldie from a time when I did the Soul-Led Educators Conference. Guys, when I tell you I had amazing speakers on there, like seriously amazing. So I chose one of those interviews to put for our podcast this week. Her name is Ellen, and she's a teacher self-care specialist. And the episode or the interview talks a lot about resiliency, which I think is the perfect thing to talk about this time of year. I won't say too much because it'll start to get redundant to the episode. So check it out. Another fun fact, this is the first time in over 20 years I have been able to go out of town right when school starts, because school has started out here and I have a conference that I get to go to in Florida. So I'm so excited. It feels weird. It feels very strange. So I hope you guys are having an excellent school year. If you have started, if you have not started yet, keep enjoying and enjoy this interview as well. You can check out Ellen's information, in the show notes. So I hope you can follow her and get some more inspiration. Okay, I'll see you guys next week. Have fun. Hello, all, and welcome back to the Soul-Led Educators Conference. Today, I'm super excited to have Ellen, who is a self-care specialist and doing amazing things. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yes, it's so great to finally meet people like in person that you like stalk on Instagram all the time.
That's right.
Why don't we start off by, if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey.
Yeah, for sure. Well, you can probably tell from my accent that I am from Australia. It's morning where I am. It's afternoon where you are while we're having this lovely chat. So I am Ellen. I am a teacher by trade, and now I'm a teacher wellbeing coach. So I work with teachers to support their self-care and their wellbeing. The business that I run is called Self-Care for Teachers, and I'm also the host of the Teacher Wellbeing Podcast. So I live in a place called Toowoomba on the east coast of Australia. It's a sort of near Brisbane and the Gold Coast, if you know where that is. And yeah, so I work from home from my little backyard office, and that's me.
That sounds amazing. What brought you? I'm just going to jump right in because now I'm super curious. What was the transition? What brought you from teacher to wellbeing coach?
Yeah, well, I mean, it was definitely spurred on partly by my own health journey, because I have some chronic illnesses. So I've had a fairly lengthy health history. And when I entered, so I had thyroid cancer when I was at university. And then when I started my teaching career, I was obviously, I had all my treatment and everything, but I was much less robust than most first year teachers who just burn the candle at both ends and push just to get everything done, and I couldn't keep up, basically. So I managed 3 years full-time teaching before I needed to drop back to part-time teaching. So I was a high school music and Japanese specialist, so language specialist, and yeah, I know it's an interesting mix. And so in my 3rd year of teaching, towards the end, I dropped back to part-time and found that was a much better balance for me. And I was really, really fortunate to have my school support that, because it's not available in every school. Not every school has the capacity to be able to change workloads like that. So, and then the next sort of 3.5 years of my teaching career, that's what I did. So I taught part-time, but we started to realize that there was, I was always going to have the struggles with my health, with chronic health issues, and therefore, struggles keeping up with the demands of the workload of being a teacher. Because as we know, it's a really, it's a significant workload, and you need to be pretty robust physically and mentally to be able to keep up. And then at the same time, I was watching I actually saw some of my colleagues burn out in really dramatic ways. And that really got me thinking. I kept thinking somebody should do something about this. And then this little voice inside would say, well, you're somebody, why don't you do something? So, so that's how it started. I started initially Self-Care for Teachers with just a blog and a Facebook group. I went on and did some further qualifications to become a wellbeing coach, and just followed my nose from there. Started the Teacher Wellbeing Podcast in 2017. And I think we're 8 seasons in now. So I'm on a season break at the moment, but we'll be coming back for season 9 later in the year, and have been coaching teachers and creating resources to support teachers ever since.
That's awesome. Yeah, non-teachers do not realize the actual workload that it takes to, and I've been noticing lately, especially because I'm going back to teaching next year after being in administration for a while. It's just so many, it just adds up. It like builds on top of each other, and you're like, you start to think, why do we do all of this?
Yes.
Like,
and so much of it is, like, I'm sure you and your viewers would have had this experience where people who are not teachers say, oh, I could never work with kids, so hard. No, that's the easy bit. Yes, there are challenges, but that's why we do it. That's the good bit. It's the administrative demands, the paperwork, the box ticking that we have to do. That's what gets us down.
Yes, I like how you call it the box ticking. Yes, and that's what I feel, the rewriting long range plans from scratch when we literally just wrote them last year. Like
but we have to do it again because somewhere somewhere somebody high up has made a change, and now we have to all redo everything that we just did. Yeah, that's right.
Yes, it's just so crazy. So I know you talk a lot about resiliency. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I have a bit of a different take. I mean, I think we all have this general understanding of resilience is like this idea of bouncing back after you have a crisis or a significant event in your life, and we talk about that in education, certainly in Australia. I'm sure it's the same in the States, talking about resilience as this idea of bouncing back after tough stuff, and how do we train people to be able to bounce back after tough stuff. And there's also this other definition that floats around of this idea of rolling with the pace of constant change. And if that's not the world in 2020 and 2021, I don't know what is.
Totally.
And teachers have just absolutely demonstrated over and over again how good they are at rolling with the pace of constant change, but it does take its toll. And so I was doing some reading and some research about resilience, and I love all the kind of traditional research about resilience, the psychological kind of approach, but I stumbled across some information about resilience in the world of engineering and infrastructure and town planning, which is totally not my background, but I stumbled across this information, and the way other industries talk about resilience is a little bit different, and it really got me thinking. So in engineering, when engineers and town planners and anyone in that kind of a world, the built environment is designing a structure or a city or a community, they think about resilience in a different way from us. They actually think about the idea that, well, if we want this water treatment plant or this electricity center to stay online during a disaster, that's what resilience means to them. So if we build this bridge, a resilient bridge is a bridge that doesn't fall down in a flood. And it just really got me thinking. I was like, okay, I want to learn a little bit more about their approach to this. And I'm not an engineer, so I'm not going to say that I'm an expert in this, but I've done a bit of learning about how they approach it. And it's actually it's a much more long-term approach. I think when we think about resilience, we think about, oh, something's happened. Now, how do I be resilient through this process that, a crisis or an event or some kind of challenge in my life? Something's happened. Now I have to be resilient. But actually, that would be the equivalent of the engineer having already built the bridge and be like, oh my God, it's flooding. How do we keep the bridge up? No. They're building the bridge in the first place. They're designing the bridge going, all right, okay, we have a 25-year flood and we have a 50-year flood level and we have a 100-year flood level. How do we design a bridge that can withstand, maybe it doesn't withstand the 100-year flood. Maybe that's going to be damaging to the bridge if there's a 100-year flood, but we need this bridge to stay up even up to the 50-year flood level. So how do we design that? Before we've even put any holes in the ground, we're actually looking at all the factors that would influence that river where the bridge is going to be in a flood, and making sure that we design a structure that is strong enough for that. And then so they're building the bridge knowing it's going to flood, planning for the flood. And it just really sparked this idea in me, because I thought so many educators, and it comes from this place of our giving heart and the fact that there is so much to do. And we, so many educators are putting themselves at the bottom of the to-do list, because the to-do list is so long and so demanding, and we really want to make sure that we're there for the kids and looking after the kids. But what that means is that we're kind of approaching things like we've built a really flimsy bridge and we're just hoping it's not going to rain. But actually, we know there's going to be, like, even before the pandemic, and the pandemic has just, turned everything up to 100. But we know there's going to be challenges in our life, and there might be an accident or an incident at school that you witness. You might have, some kind of challenge going on in a professional sense, but it could also be that work's going okay, but now maybe there's a relationship breakdown in your life, or somebody in your life is, a death in the family, or you have to move house, which we know is one of the most stressful, events in people's lives, or an illness or injury to yourself that creates the challenge in our life. So it's not always about work. Sometimes it's a personal life thing, because teachers are people first, and teachers second. But it just got me thinking about this idea that, oh my goodness, engineers build the bridge planning for the flood. That's what resilience means to them. The resilient bridge is only resilient if we take into account the fact that it's going to flood. We just don't know when, but it's going to flood.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, we're approaching our health and well-being kind of hoping it doesn't rain.
Yeah. When we know it will, and everybody knows it will. We all know it's coming. Yeah.
Yeah, but we're so in the moment. Like, we just have to get through today. We can't think about next.
Because it's so much.
Yeah.
It feels like an impossible thing to also add to the list, to think about the future and prepare for the future. First of all,
and prepare for an unknown future.
Yeah. I'm a science teacher, so I love when science comes. And you would not believe how many of these interviews, science, it's like I call science in.
Yeah, you must do.
Yeah, that is awesome. And I love the engineering analogy. So what are some of your ways or ideas to be able to build that resiliency in the beginning?
Yeah, so I mean, it really starts with that, like for the engineer, it starts with that design phase before they've put any holes in the ground, before we're anywhere near building an actual bridge. And I think we need to start with design as well in our own lives. So I've got, 5, or run through all 5, but there's sort of 5 parts to my resilient teacher framework that I have kind of created from a mix of the research, but also from this analogy. And it is an analogy, but I think it's really helpful to help us understand. It's like, okay, I can understand that idea of, I'm like my personal resilience is like this bridge that an engineer builds, and I have to think about it that way, because it's not going to happen by accident. It does actually happen by design. So number 1 is to design your life, which really is about not living by default anymore, not sort of living and letting life happen to us, but actually stepping into the driver's seat a little bit and saying, okay, sure, there's lots that I can't control, but what can I control? And where do I want to be? So I've got to chart that course. I want to be, more resilient, or by this time next year, I would like to achieve these goals. Well, I've got to know where I'm going before I can start sort of planning the journey to get there. Knowing, of course, that things won't go to plan and life will throw up curveballs, and that's part of the process. But we have to start with that design phase. So that includes being obviously organized in our professional life, but it's also about our personal life and making sure that we're connected to our values, connected to what matters most to us, really clear on what we want to achieve and what we can let go of, which is easier said than done, but it's about being really clear in that design phase and building a regular practice into our life where we check in with ourselves and talk, whether it's a journaling practice, or maybe we have a coach or a therapist or just a good friend who we're kind of treating as we're doing this on a buddy system, checking in with each other and asking each other, what are your goals this week? Or how did things go with that plan that you had? What went well, what didn't go well? And just checking in really regularly. And part of the design phase then is also having a plan for the other 4 areas, which are nourish your body, nurture your mind, maintain your supports, and feed your soul. So the idea, and of course, this is the Soul-Led Educators Conference, so that last one is going to resonate really well. But that with that, really, that idea that we are whole people, we're not just brains walking around, delivering our lessons and doing our paperwork, just brains on a stick. We're whole people. We have a body, and I'm sure everyone would have heard that phrase Maslow before Bloom when we talk about with students. We know they need to have breakfast. They need to hopefully be coming from a safe home. They're not always, but if they're not coming from a safe home, how do we create safety in the classroom for them? They need to, we know that students will not learn as well if they haven't been getting good sleep. So all of those basic kind of Maslow's hierarchy, the bottom level of Maslow's hierarchy, that's about nourishing our body, just to make sure that we've got the vessel in good nick to be able to keep up. And it's like a battery, it's like the phone battery, if we're always depleting it and never recharging it, it stops working eventually.
Yeah, I like what you're saying, like about how we know the kids need this, we know the kids need that. And that's my big thing, is that we always work so hard to make our students whole, complete little beings, right? But we're not whole and complete ourselves, and spend no time working on that. I don't even know how, really. That's why
that's right.
That's why your message is so great. It's because we were never taught it in school, and social emotional learning wasn't like even a thing beyond that. And now we're trying to impart these like skills and stuff that we don't even have.
That's right. And we're also working in a system. And I think it's really important to recognize the systemic factors, capitalism, racism, all the isms that are going to impact everybody differently. But we're all working with these systemic factors that actually expect us to just be workers without any needs, just to be machines that keep showing up without any actual physical or social emotional needs. But that's not reality. And so many teachers are such caring, giving souls and care so much about the students, and also want to do a good job, want to keep their job for next year, next semester, next year, and want to do a good job because we're conscientious, capable people. So if the administrators say, well, we need you to do this now, we do it because, we're conscientious and we want to make sure we're doing our job well. But again, that often comes at the expense of ourselves. So we have it's about thinking it, sort of rethinking it, thinking, well, actually, if I'm depleted, I can't actually show up and do my job very well. And the thing about our body needs, our physiological needs, is we can delay them for quite a while, like we can get through the day without going to the toilet if there was no break, we can. And so there are definitely times where we need to do that. But then also that becomes a bit of a habit where then we just delay our needs all the time instead of making that the exception. And the exception in the exceptional circumstance where, of course, we really can't leave the room right now to go to the bathroom. But actually on other days, there might have been a 10-minute gap between lessons that we could go, but we didn't because we're so used to that habit of delaying.
And we might have had to bother someone else.
Yes.
It might put something on someone else, and we would hate to do that.
Yes.
Because we can do it all ourselves. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
That's such a great example of like of everything that a teacher does, the whole bathroom thing.
Yeah.
And delaying.
But it's the same with, like, I know a lot of teachers don't eat lunch because there isn't a lot of time. There's not a lot of time, but that doesn't mean they couldn't have something. But you have to be that goes back to that design phase. Like, you have to actually be prepared with some kind of food that you could eat on the run, that's going to sustain you. Something that's not, not a donut, but something that's going to be sustain you for the next couple of hours of work. But because we're so on the back foot all the time, just trying to keep up with the treadmill of the teaching and learning cycle, we're not necessarily making the time to do that design. So then we just skip lunch because we can survive until the end of the day without lunch, but it doesn't mean we're functioning very well. And then that becomes that habit that we
would never want a kid to do that.
No, exactly.
We would never say skip lunch so you can get this homework done or something. No. You know what I mean? We never say that. And like you said, it's about intentionality and being intentional in what you do, but a lot of it, I think something you said before is about the letting go part. Not only the what am I going to do and how am I going to do it, but what can I let go and it's going to be okay.
Yeah. And it's hard.
Oh yeah.
It's a really, really hard thing. So easy to say, but it's a really hard thing to do. And it is like a practice that we just have to do over and over and over again, and keep reminding ourselves that, when we're not doing anything wrong by looking after ourselves.
Yeah. And it reminds me of, like, there's a lot of talk about teacher boundaries lately,
Yeah.
about teachers having personal boundaries, and it's okay to say no, or say, this is the thing that's breaking the camel's back. This is the straw breaking the camel's back, and and I understand why we're doing it, but what maybe can we release here, instead of trying to be like the superhumans that, oh yeah, the administration wants this, the system wants this, the parents want this, the students want this, and I'll just do all the things.
Yeah.
Instead of saying, you know what, I can't do all of the things, and I don't want to do all of the things.
No, and it's not unreasonable to say I actually am not a superhuman that can't do all these things. It's not unreasonable to say, you know what, I need lunch and sleep to survive.
Yeah, it's okay to leave when your contract period ends. Like, that's okay.
Yeah.
And it's okay to come when your contract period starts.
Exactly.
Like,
yep.
And you can get things done. And we out here, we have a 30-minute duty-free lunch. We're required to be given 30-minute duty-free lunch. Take it. Because everything,
I mean, we have the same thing in our but people don't take it because there's something else to do,
Yeah. I remember teaching. I never took it until I taught many, many years, and finally was like, you know what? Like, this is important. I can actually get more done if I take this time to decompress and step back. And you can see when I decompress like that, I can see what I'm able to release better.
Absolutely. And like, again, there's going to be those exception times when something is happening. A student is in crisis and we can't take my lunch because I have to be here with this student right now. But that's the exception. That doesn't happen every day.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally see that. So we had nourish.
Yeah, nourish the body. And then what we just talked about, that whole idea of letting go. What can we let go of? What are our boundaries? That really comes into the nurturing the mind. And it's nurturing, but it's also managing our mind, because I actually sometimes think, our thoughts and our beliefs are kind of like students in the classroom. Sometimes we need to redirect them. Sometimes we actually have to kind of take charge here and say, no, we're not going down that thinking path. This is the way we're going here. And actually it's that, again, a constant practice of, affirming ourselves, affirming that we are allowed to be looking after ourselves. And of course, doing all those good mental health support practices that work for us. So things like journaling and meditation, if they work for you, if they resonate with you, or it might mean going and seeing a therapist if you feel like that you've got some bigger stuff to work through, in name of that social emotional well-being. And so that nurture your mind is really, it really is all the social emotional well-being stuff that we know, but it is also those beliefs that many teachers have that it is about an unlearning process and learning to let go and set boundaries and affirm that we're allowed to do that.
And you said you were talking about like the voices in your head, the thinking patterns, like not only identifying that they're there, but who is that?
Yeah.
Who's
that
saying
come
that?
from?
Yeah. Is it
true? Is it
yes.
true? Maybe, quite possibly not. Don't believe everything you think.
Yeah. There's an acronym when you tell a student, like when a student says something, make sure to think, is it true? Is it kind? Is it?
I've heard that one.
Yeah, I can't remember the acronym, but like that might be a good thing to implement.
Absolutely. And I think especially when we're because we do tell ourselves stories, and I think education as a culture has some stories. Like, for example, whatever, I've got to sacrifice myself for the students, for the sake of the students. But actually being able to differentiate, is this one of those situations where I need to sacrifice myself for the safety of the students, or is this actually a situation where this is a box ticking exercise for to go in somebody's filing cabinet somewhere, I don't need, that's not the same kind of a situation as there's a student in front of me in a crisis. I need to put my needs on hold for a bit. So being able to challenge those stories and differentiate between those situations, which is, you know, it's an ongoing process. We're going to have to be doing that forever because new situations will come up.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's so many voices coming at us.
Yeah, so many.
What was the third one?
So that was the third one, nurture your mind. And then the fourth one, because the first one's design your life. So we've got design your life, nourish your body, nurture your mind. The fourth one is maintain your supports. And that obviously, that's your support network. That speaks into all the resilience research that talks about how important it is in times of crisis, but, you know, in good times as well, to have strong support networks. And whether that might be your partner at home, it might be your family, it might be your chosen family or friendship group, but it also comes down to like seeking help and asking help when you need it, which is something that teachers find really hard because we are so capable, but actually asking for help, asking for support, maintaining a structure of support around us that isn't necessarily our family and friends, but it might be the therapist, like I mentioned. It might be, for example, asking for help at work to say, actually, this is an area of the curriculum that I'm not very confident in. Could I get some mentoring here? Or it might be something else to do with your health in your life. So a lot of the teachers that come to work with me are looking for some support, and an objective perspective, somebody who understands the classroom. They don't need a therapist, but they do need some support for making some shifts in their life. And that's what coaching is about. Or it might be, for example, I'm pregnant at the moment and I'm seeing a pelvic floor physiotherapist, or I think you guys call them a physical therapist. Because do you know what? That's important. And I know I need some support in that area. And so actually going and making those appointments, just practical health appointments, or, partly for accountability so that I make sure I do the things that I'm supposed to do to make sure that I'm well. And also partly for that expert advice, because teachers are really, really smart, but we don't know everything about everything. And we're allowed to ask for help.
Yeah. And again, it's what we would tell our students to do. We would tell our students to ask for help and and yet, like you said, it's chronic that teachers want to be. And we see, there's just so much that we see that these other teachers, especially with Instagram and social media, right? And we're like, oh, I need to be like that.
And that they don't need any help. They're perfect because their Instagram feed is perfect. It's a highlight reel. Right. It's not their whole life.
Just like everybody else, just like real life, that's the teacher highlight reel. Yeah. They're having issues too. That also makes me think of when you're looking at your support group, I can think of back to my early days of teaching and the teachers that I hung around and their views of things. And I can remember there was a group of teachers at one school just was really negative. And that's what we did at lunch. And that's why a lot of people avoided lunch.
Because it's miserable.
But we avoid it because it's just complaining. So creating those boundaries and finding your teacher tribe.
Absolutely. That is such a good point. And that's it is a boundary thing, but it also goes back to that design phase as well, of saying well, what kind of support do I need in my life for these areas? What maybe problems or struggles am I having, and what kind of support could I find for that? And then also, what roadblocks am I encountering? Oh, there's this bunch of sort of teacher friends who are my friends, but we only ever talk about school and we only ever complain. And whether or not that means ditching those friends, or maybe it means saying, hey, can we talk about something other than school?
Yeah, totally. I can see that. Oh, this is so awesome and so important. And the resiliency in engineering will stick with me forever. Also in engineering, I know that a building, they don't necessarily build a building to be there has to be some wiggle room.
Yeah, absolutely.
In the building, or if it's too structured, it will collapse with anything that occurs. And I think that's a great analogy as well.
Yeah, balance isn't actually this state of perfect static balance. It's actually sort of a bit of wobbling, going back to center.
Yeah. Oh, just look at how science just fits everywhere. I'm just saying, okay?
Absolutely. Well, and there is a fair amount of research, talking of science, there's a fair amount of research around resiliency in different fields, because that's what got me sort of started on this journey, was like, oh, other fields don't talk about it the way we talk about it in education. That's really curious. I'm going to follow that little thing of curiosity. Yeah.
That's awesome. That's such a great way to, like, now I want to find like all the things, like go follow all the little paths in my spare teacher time.
Yeah. Well, see, so that leads really nicely into the fifth one, which is feed your soul, which I think for many educators, they are curious. They do love learning. And, feeding your soul, I think it's fairly self-explanatory, but it's just something that lights you up, that brings you joy, that gives you meaning in life. And again, because so many of us are just on this treadmill, we're not taking any time out for ourselves, for those kind of basic Maslow's needs. We're certainly not taking time out to do something that seems like it's not that important. It's just because I'm interested in that and I just want to go learn because I like learning and it's fun. I won't do that because that's not as important as the work to-do list. And it doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be that. It could be reading for pleasure, reading a book that has nothing to do with work. What a concept. Or it can be your spiritual, your faith practices as well. If you go to church or have some other religious practice that really brings meaning in your life, making time for that to feed your soul. Because again, we are people first and teachers second. And if we look after the person, the teacher will tend to look after themselves. And so that last one, that I'm sure that the rest of the conference will have lots of ideas for people of ways they can feed their soul. And again, then it comes back to that design phase of saying, well, how do I feed my soul this month? It doesn't mean that it has to be every single day because life is busy, but it might be setting a goal for ourselves that, well, I'm going to get out in nature at least once every weekend. And just connect with the living things in the planet. That might be what it is. Or I'm going to read a book for pleasure at least once every single weekend, or for 10 minutes every single day. It doesn't have to be this huge to-do list.
That's such a great point. And like you said, putting it with intention, because exactly like you said,
because if we don't, it won't happen.
It won't happen. We'll say it's going to happen, but unless it's an actual plan and we do it, and maybe even have, I think you mentioned before, like an accountability partner.
Yeah, exactly.
Make sure we're doing these important things. We have tons of accountability on the work side, like coming at us, but accountability to make sure you're feeding your soul and your mind.
And that accountability piece can also be one of the things that you can think about in the maintaining your supports area, or in the design phase as well, about that idea of, well, okay, I want to make sure that I'm exercising because, that's important to my health and it's really good for my mental health. But, if I don't have a gym membership or a personal trainer appointment at the gym, I'm not going to do it, but having them waiting there for me means I'm going to get out of bed early and go and turn up,
Yes. Or even just meeting a friend there. Like,
exactly.
That's why I go. I'm like, every time I'm like, I have to go because she's going to be there waiting for me.
Yeah, which is perfect. And I actually, I think sometimes we beat ourselves up for that. We say, oh, I should be able to do it on my own. I shouldn't need this extra level of accountability. But actually, do you know what? One, teachers, we have decision fatigue because we make so many decisions all throughout the day and we're managing everybody else. And that really just does drain our mental energy and our willpower and all of those other things that mean that maybe in the summer holidays, we actually do have the energy to make ourselves go without anybody waiting there for us. But actually also let's work with our energy and our level of, decision fatigue and just go, you know what? If I know that they're waiting there for me, I don't do all of this in my brain, beating myself up and saying I should go, but I've got this other thing to do. And just all these stories that we tell, I just turn up.
It just is.
It just takes all that kind of mental energy away and I just show up and I get it done. So work with that and say, it's totally okay to ask for support and to need that accountability to get some of these things that are important to me on the list.
Yes. And that's such a great point. The decision fatigue and creating that intention. As we wrap up today, do you have any last messages you'd like to leave our audience with?
Well, what I would say is please don't feel overwhelmed by this. Then now there's these extra 5 things that I have to do every single day. And it's hugely overwhelming. My plate was already full. I would say just start with one. And what I usually say to my teachers that I work with is you don't have to do all 5 of these every single day or even every single week. Think about the one that is maybe either your kind of the lowest, the weakest link for you, and focus on that, or think about the one that will give you the quickest win. So maybe you actually think, well, feeding my soul, that wouldn't be very hard to work into my current schedule. And I think it would really give me such a boost that it would be such a big win for me fairly easily, that then I would have more energy and motivation for the other things. Or it might be the opposite, where you say, well, you know what, actually I'm not sleeping enough and that's depleting me so much that I just need to put all my energy into, maybe I need to see the doctor to find out if there's something underlying medical that's going on that's stopping me sleeping, or is it managing my stress that's stopping me sleeping, or, I need to put all my energy into figuring out this sleep thing, because once I do that, everything else will be easier. So think about it from just one of those 2 ways, either your quickest win or the area that's the biggest challenge at the moment that's causing the most depletion, so that you can focus your energy, your limited energy and time and resources, somewhere that's going to give you some bang for your buck, really. And then give yourself permission to let the rest go until you've got time to add those in a bit later on.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes, yes, yes. Thank you so much. And speaking of accountability, a coach is a great way to do that. And Ellen's information is below. So check that out, follow her. And
if you want more information on this framework, I've got a whole course, so come and join.
And I love the courses. Yeah, like learn about something that will benefit, that's to benefit you. That is amazing. Thank you for joining us today, Ellen.
Thanks for having me.
It was amazing. And everybody, I hope you found some tidbits that will help you in your soul-led journey. And I will see you next time.